Trevor Black, thank you so much for coming on Northern Vibe. I can't tell you how excited I am about this, and I know the viewers are going to love it too.
Matt, you may be chewing an old rubber rag. I don't know if I've got much to say.
I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, and I know that you've been working in the yard. So
yeah.
And apparently, I'm your excuse to get out of the heat. Was that the go?
That's for sure.
So again, mate, all jokes aside, I know you're busy, and I really do appreciate your time. But I suppose we should just dive right in. First, tell us about you. Tell us about your family, background, and your interests before we get into your time on the bench.
Yeah, well, I'm the son of an old dairy farmer, born in the Toowoomba too many years ago to count. The grandson of an Irish woman and a Scots whaler's cook, both first. My father's a first generation Australian. The eldest of four. Two sisters, being the middle, have passed, died very young, both about 63, 64 years of age. I've got a younger brother who you may even know. He is a defensive driving instructor in Brisbane. He used to train all the police recruits in defensive driving. John Black, defensive driving management Australia.
I knew him. Yes, he taught me to drive.
Yeah. I think I
never. I mean, Black is a common Irish surname. So
yeah.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, I think we may have discussed this once before, but
well, where is he?
He's running his own business, Driving Management Australia. He's teaching all the fireys and ambos defensive driving tactics now. He also does the odd private arrangement.
Yeah, he was a military driver, I think.
He'd been in the army for 10 years. He said all the years he was in the army, no one was game to start a war. So
as soon as he left,
only started fighting when he left the military. So yeah. So born in Toowoomba. Before I have much memory, we lived at Oakey. We went to a dairy farm in Mullaney for 10 years. Back to Toowoomba. Then I got on the bike and went basically all around Queensland in the public service.
So that's so it was you got into the public service before you got to the bench, or was that a pathway? Was always your?
Yeah, no, it wasn't a pathway. It's a bit of a funny story. I had a cousin who was in justice administration, eventually become a magistrate. A bloke by the name of Bob Sullivan, but he was in justice administration at one stage. I was working in the State Works Department. They call them Tubal now, but I was an audit clerk there, and Bob got a hold of me. He said, "You're never going to go far in that job, boy." He said, "I'll get you a job in the Magistrate's Court service." So I ended up out in Charleville. That was my first transfer in the public service.
And it's really it's an Irish thing, joining the public service. There's a lot of people.
Oh, it is. Yeah. Well,
a lot of people with surnames like us that kind of
Yeah. Well, Bob was a magistrate. A cousin of mine, Greg McIntyre, was a magistrate. A cousin-in-law was a magistrate. So we were a bit of a clan.
Yeah. So, I mean, is that what specifically got you into the bench? So you got into the public service and thought to yourself, I can do it. Getting on the bench is no small thing, Trevor, if you don't mind me making.
Well, it was in my day, Matt, to be honest. In my day, it was a career path. You did certain exams. You moved up the ladder on seniority. Eventually, if you didn't soil your nest too badly, you ended up as a magistrate. So it was a career path. It was you certainly didn't come from a comfort zone of sitting in Brisbane. All of a sudden, you're on the bench. We had to travel. The years I spent in various places with family, going from centre to centre as a clerk, as a depositions clerk, taking recording the evidence, etc., etc. It was a pretty hard training regime.
And look, I always liked that system, and I know it had its. I know the Fitzgerald inquiry specifically said, look, it's not good because people are too close to the police. And I've got to be honest, that kind of wasn't my experience. Like the magistrates that were the toughest on the coppers were the
old-timers.
Yeah, because they kind of knew, whereas, and look, that's just my experience. I mean, if, I'm sure there's going to be, because I actually it's pretty cool, Trev, because I get a couple of defense lawyers who kind of like get in every now and then and jump on, especially when I'm doing the legal stuff, like put a bit of feedback off James Ellens's his Jim Ellen's interview that one caused a bit of a stir, but I understand that that's people's perspective, and I totally get it. But like again, it's just all I can just do is indicate my experience, and the toughest, the toughest ones that I had were because they kind of knew. They really knew the way the system worked.
They had a real life experience. They'd been in the bush. They'd worked cheek by jowl with some of the local coppers. My neighbours in various places were senior constables, usually just second in charge of the station. We socialised with them. We saw what the coppers went through in the sticks. How often they were brick in the wall against some pretty nasty stuff. We also knew that where they cut the corners, and you got a perspective of how far you can trust these people. You knew if it didn't feel right, it didn't feel right. It didn't feel right because you lived there, you had life experience of these issues.
Yeah. So do you think it was fair to say that the old school of magistracy were too close to the police? Again, I mean, no. I think it was. Well, yeah. I mean, again, that was not my experience. Like we were.
No, I don't think so. Every magistrate I ever knew, and I knew lots, went about their job with a dedication to doing the right thing. Of course, there are a lot of magistrates that were not legally trained. It was only in relatively recent times that magistrates had to be legally trained. Previously they used to pass a stipendiary magistrates exam, and that was just basic law. It was only in recent times they had to be qualified solicitors or barristers. I think sometimes, again, in small towns, magistrates probably knew a bit what that was going on. I mean, conflict of interest wasn't as highly valued as it is now. A magistrate, I don't think there's ever a magistrate that said, "Oh, you must be guilty because the police arrested you," or anything like that. I don't. They may have been a little more accepting of police evidence. Maybe the baseline of beyond reasonable doubt might have been a little lower than than more academically inclined appointees, but I think they always took the principle beyond reasonable doubt.
I mean, my experience, and this, you know, as a junior constable, was we were trained to, fear is the wrong word, but we were trained to, it's like, okay, these people are going to hold you responsible.
Mm-hmm.
They're not fools. And the way it was hammered into us, my first station was, as you know, Rockhampton. And then I went Rocky, Winton, back to Rockhampton, up to TI, and then through the Cape. But the idea was, like, it was really well articulated by one of my sergeants who said, look, Maloney, and it was one of my early court cases, magistrates talk. They're like coppers. They're not idiots. They've been around. Just get in there, tell the truth, put the coal in the truck. What happens to the coal after you put it in the truck is none of your business. All right?
Not your problem. That's
right. Yeah. The person who was actually, you know, and that's the way it was articulated to me. And it was like, you know, be scared. When I say scared, fear, I don't mean in the sense of, oh my God, but it's just like,
no.
You know, you understand what I mean. In the same sort of fear and respect you all would be a better way. The same sort of fear and respect you should have for a religious circumstance. You know, it says in the Bible, you know, fear.
Yeah, Father John Father John or Pastor Pete. Yeah, it's they have an authority. You might necessarily accept that they're the be all and end all, but they have an authority. I guess that's why when I was in small country towns, we used to have a circuiting magistrate. They'd come down for the day, and you know, you had them, and you had that awe of them. They had a position of power, and yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full, sir.
Well, as you know, it took you years to hammer out of me calling you sir. It's like, not a minute. It's like, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. How many years did you spend on the bench all up?
Depends what you count from, Matt. I first went on the bench as a full-time, not a full-time, that's wrong. A permanent appointment as an acting magistrate, Thursday Island, in 1980. I was appointed formally to the bench in 1990, so 32 years. 32 years a formal appointment, and 40 years in an acting capacity.
Wow, that is a long time. And
yeah, bloody hell.
And look, I know there's a special place in your heart for Thursday Island.
Yep.
Can you tell us how you ended up there and the experiences there? Because for the few viewers that aren't from North Queensland, well, actually I get a lot of viewers that aren't from North Queensland, and I will give some contextual information, but like that's a.
Well, as I said, we were going through the promotional steps. I married in 1973 in Toowoomba, and I was appointed as the assistant clerk of the court, acting registrar in Ipswich. I passed my exams, and I ended up as the clerk of the court in Julia Creek for 2 years. Passed a few more exams, ended up as a clerk of the court in Mitchell. Qualified. They needed the position was advertised, the clerk of the court and acting magistrate, Thursday Island. You had to be qualified to be appointed as an acting magistrate. So I applied and I got it. That was in September 1980. And once I got there, I thought I was in heaven. I mean, it was still only a Division 2 clerk of the courts post. You did all the duties of a magistrate day in, day out, but you were paid as a Division 2 clerk of the court. But we did everything from customs and immigration cases to terrific. It was a very, very junior clerk of the court. I was 30. One of the complaints about the locus was I was just a boy, and I was just a boy, very, very, very unlearned in the law, but you had to learn very quickly.
And you've got a real affinity with the Torres Strait Islanders, and they with you.
Yeah, I think so.
Without wanting to sound like
I would like to. I would like to think so.
Well, I can attest to that. Like they still talk about you, and like I've been out 2 years now. I went into DATSEP, and mate, yeah, the island people still know you. Like,
well, I think
tough but fair was the consensus.
Well, I think I went there. Well, to every place I went there with an attitude that this is my community. I am not going to confine myself in the community that I'm living in to the white hierarchy, the local police, the priests, the school teachers. I went and played football in all the communities. I coached. I was secretary of the football clubs. I joined the parents and friends associations. I sat on judiciary boards. I was chairman of the hospital board. I was invited to wedding feasts and tombstone unveilings. And if they wanted me there, I was going to be there. I mean, it was my community. You know, one of my sons was born in Thursday Island. Rather than my then wife fly out to Cairns to have the baby was born on Thursday Island. And I think all the islanders appreciate that. They knew I wasn't there. I wasn't just transiting. I was there to for as long as I needed to be there. I was there.
And yeah, that's such a big deal. Like I was talking to Jo Butland actually, who's probably her interview is going to go out this Monday.
Mm-hmm.
She's an incredible sportswoman who's done a lot of work.
Yeah. I sat in the judiciary with touched judiciary with Jo. Probably 6 months or so ago.
She's a legend.
Mm.
We were talking about this precise subject, and like I still get the odd phone call about tombstone opening or a funeral, and you kind of can't say no. Well, not that
that's right. Well, it's rather an insult. If you're invited, it's almost an insult not to go. I've been to 3 in the last 2 years, and I've got another one coming up with Seaman Dan. Probably, I don't know when they're going to have Seaman's tombstone, but Desi Murfitt and John Turner. Yeah. So,
and these community things matter. They really do. And Seaman's a legend. Like God, I've had more than 1 or 2 beers with that fella. Let me tell you that for no charge.
Who was that? Sorry.
I've had more than 1 or 2 beers with Seaman, even when he used to pop down here with in Cairns, because my then fiance, now long-suffering wife, worked at the Gateway, and that's he used to play there. He used to play there.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And
well, he's passed, of course. Did you know?
Yeah, of course.
That?
Yeah. But
Yeah.
God rest his soul. But look, all those years on the bench, and you're dealing with the kind of the best and the worst and the nitty gritty, I suppose, of society. What did it teach you about human nature? I'd really like to kind of like go right into that, because that's, I think, a really unique perspective of value that you're going to have.
Well, I guess what I've learned in the probably tens of thousands of cases I've sat on is that there are very few really, really bad people.
Okay.
Most people I've dealt with anyway, probably 95% have a inherent goodness. They stuff up. They do stupid things. They have arguments with their wives, and domestic violence results. How anybody can say that that's not evil, I don't know, but things happen. but generally speaking, most people are inherently good. There are some very, very bad, twisted individuals out there. And is it rearing or caring? Do they have is the genesis of their badness in their past? Is it a mental issue sometimes? A drug issue? People have done terrible things under the influence of drugs, particularly, as you know, ice.
Yeah.
It has caused more harm to this world than just about anything else I can think of. What people have done, the influence of drugs is appalling. But even then, I think sometimes if they weren't under the influence of those substances, inherently, most people are good.
Yeah.
I guess that's the key take of my career.
You know, that's so reassuring, and I've got to say that resonates with me too, because you know, people are intrigued by your job and well, jobs that we used to do, which is in justice administration, and people would be kind of like genuinely shocked when I would say things like, you know, most people, what it kind of like taught me, and look, I know this might be a controversial thing to say too, but like, I think this take has been shaped by the fact that we spent disproportionate amounts of time up in the Torres Straits. You know, they're just a wonderful people. I mean, neither you and I mean, we've been exposed to the kind of what we know that we're not, well, I'm not misty-eyed worshipper. Like, I'm not this believer in the noble savage idea. I simply just don't believe that. Like, I see humanity. But I did recognize up there, I think, because of the strong influence of Christianity, you know, a real ethos of decency. And when people went off the rails, at least there was a recognition that people have gone off the rails.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go even farther, Trevor, and I'm wondering, you know, don't hesitate to disagree.
Just on that point, Matt, before you go on, you and I both did a lot of work in the Torres Strait and in the Indigenous communities up the Cape. And there's a distinction to be drawn between Torres Strait Islander people and the inhabitants of the communities. And I think it might be a huge leap. But the Torres Strait Islander has never been dispossessed. He's always known where he might never have visited Murri Island. But if you talk to a Townsville Torres Strait Islander walking along the Esplanade and say, "Where do you come from?" He said, "Oh, I come from Murri." You talk to an Arakoon man or a Porpora man, they've been dragged from their country. They've been thrown together with traditional enemies from the Stone Age. They have been, I guess, pampered's not the word I'm looking for. They've been patronised, probably is the word I'm looking for. They've been told what to do and when to do it and what colour. And I think it's coming back to bite us. I really do. I mean, we're trying to put into a position of power now people who have had to leave their communities to get their source of how do I put this? Their source of authority. So they have authority in Cairns with you and me because they're professors or police officers or doctors or lawyers, but they don't have any authority back in their communities. I mean, you left us, you went away. Torres Strait Islanders go away too, and they often don't come back, but they do have still that strong bond with their family. You know, not very many Islanders wouldn't go back to Torres Strait once every 10 years or so for a tombstone or a family gathering of some sort.
Yeah, exactly. Like that. Yes, I would agree with that with qualifications. Like, I mean, I think that's why that song "My Island Home," and it's a bit of a cliche, but like art actually that encapsulated that view and that understanding.
Of course, that was a Pilgrim Brothers song from up in the territory, of course, and where they were talking about or some Bathurst Island, weren't they? So not the Torres Straits.
Yeah, it wasn't
much as
Torres
we
Straits.
much as we love the song, but it's
yeah, and we associate it with Christine Arnaud, and that's true. I think I think the other things that impact, and I've thought about this a lot, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot. The Torres Strait Islander people were almost at feudal would be the wrong word because, but like we're talking about settled people who had farming and who had distinct hierarchies of authority that were different from, but recognizable by, the colonizers, by white people. They kind of looked at it, we can recognize this. Like, yes, we get it.
Yeah.
As
there were boundaries.
There were boundaries. There were all these,
whatever.
There were all these. There was a hierarchy of authority, and there was this idea of possession, like of owning something. Where that didn't really exist in the true sense of the word. I think when the colonizers, most of them actually, and I know this is controversial, but it's true. Most of them were well intentioned. Like, that's not to say that there weren't terrible atrocities and there wasn't a lot of bloodshed and there weren't a lot of like weirdos who just shouldn't have been in those positions, because when you're colonizing, it's always the marginal people who go to the margins.
That's right. They're the ones that go.
They're the sort of people that go. I mean,
it's very wrong of somebody to walk into a country, whether it be Queensland or Australia as a whole, where there are people there, and just say, "Well, this is our land now. You can move away." I mean, how? I mean, it's happened all around the world. I mean, I'm not excusing anybody or suggesting that it's unique to Australia, but look, North America, probably much more densely settled than Australia was, but the English colonizers, the French, Spanish colonizers, they moved in and said, "Well, this is our land now. Move over, blackfella or red man, whatever it is, and if you don't, we're going to shoot you."
Yeah,
I mean, it's an evil trait in the humankind. I guess the Indians also did that with other tribes of Indians. I mean,
see that's what we've got to recognize. I think the problem with all of this, it's like, and really it's scapegoating. It's saying, well, this is a white people thing. That's what white people do. Yeah, well, I mean, white people did that, but that's what human beings do to each other. That's this.
Isn't it appropriate for us, though, Matt, to recognise that and where possible make recompense for it?
I would say yes, but there are a lot of qualifications to that, and and it depends on what you mean. I mean, I've had this discussion with, because I left the police, and I can't say anything. It's like I got in trouble for saying what government department I worked in once, but I worked for another government department and had a lot of discussions with a lot of Indigenous people on this, and we agreed on the same. It's like, yes, but when I say we've got to reconcile, there were two very different meanings going on. In my head, went this, and but going back to the the distinction between Cape Indigenous people and the Straits, like that was just so different. And I'm not even going to edit this interview because it's so good. No, it is, and these are the best chats. It was so different. Like, when the settlers turned up there, the colonizers turned up, they would have looked at this and just gone, what the? Like this is just
Mm.
totally unrecognizable. And the religious worldview, so different.
Mm.
And the best way of articulating it is kind of like telling a story, really. Like I was in Arakoon, and it was a 4-person station then, and we were going through a particularly bad spate of violence, and like it was nasty. And like it was hard. Like we were working really long hours, and it wasn't just like, when I was saying working, like we weren't just typing, although that was a lot of it. Like, mate, we were out, we had stuff thrown at us, we're fighting people, we're arresting people.
Being spat on, spears being thrown at you.
God, it was tough. Like, it was genuinely really, really hard. And of course, you get drained, like you get emotionally drained. Like the Matt Maloney you're talking to now is a very different person to the Matt Maloney who's hungry, tired, exhausted, sweaty, all
scared,
terrified, like, and frustrated, all of these things. And, after a while, like we're kind of like sitting there, I'm talking to the sergeant, and the violence was, to give really quick contextual. It was like we were just trying to stop people from hurting each other. Like it wasn't an attack on the police or anything like that. It was like, this mob versus this mob. And I'm sitting there and like I'm really frustrated. And I'm like, after we'd just been having, I'm like, Sarge, why can't these people see we're just trying to help? Like we're just trying to stop them from killing each other. Like, how is it that we're the bad guys? Like, how did this dynamic come across? And the sergeant was really good. And I won't say who it is, although you'd be acquainted with it. He just goes, Matt, it's like this. You've watched, this was going back in the 90s. You've watched Close Encounters of the First Time. Yeah. You've watched all those other E.T. and all those other alien films. I said, yeah. So you're familiar with the concept of aliens? I said, yeah. He said, what would you do right now when we're sitting outside at the Arakoon barracks if a UFO landed and just came in and landed right here? What would that do to your psyche, to, how you think and what's going on? Mate, that would astound the hell out of me. Like that would rock my world. And he goes, yeah. Now imagine this. A little door comes down, and like humanoid-looking figures who are kind of like different from you, like enough for you to recognize as, sentient beings, but really different, come walking out. What would you do? And I'd be like, that's like rock my world, but squared. Is yeah. Then imagine they come walking up to you and talk to you and say, "G'day, how you going? We're from the Dog Star, whatever it is, galaxy long. We're from a galaxy far, far away, and we're here to help. What would you do?" And I'd be like, "That'd be astounding," And it's like, okay, well, then they started saying to you, everything you think about the world and the universe is wrong. The way that you've structured your religious beliefs, so the most fundamental way that you perceive things, wrong. The way you structure your family, wrong. The way you create wealth, wrong. The way you distribute wealth, wrong. The way you resolve disputes, wrong. The way everything that you think about the world is wrong. And look, we've got a better way of doing things. Come on board. If you don't, like, because we're here to help. Remember, we're here to help, and we're well-intentioned. And they kind of are, but if you don't do it our way, we've got some pretty big ray guns in the ship over there.
Yeah, zap.
What would you do? And I sat there, honestly, for like it was a long amount of time going, I don't know. He goes, well, you'd probably, there's a number of things you'd do as a human being, Ryan. Like you might go mad, you might get angry, you might decide to fight, you might run away, you might you might want to join them because like it's so exciting, it's so cool. It's like, oh my God, like this look at this amazing technology. So you're going to be kind of like, oh, I want a bit of that. Probably all of those things at the same time, and it might send you mad. And I went, yeah. And he goes, you see where I'm going with this? I'm like,
bingo. Yeah, very good analogy. Yeah.
And that kind of like, for me, that moment in Arakoon, it was almost a Damascene kind of moment. So I think that's part. Like when I look at what's happening, because I kind of laugh now with this decolonisation movement. Again, I'm not asking you to agree or disagree with me. You know, friends, and I genuinely hope we are friends because I have so much. I'm sorry to be sucking.
Yeah.
I have so much respect for you. It's not funny. I was an agent of colonisation, and frankly, and this is going to be super, but like I don't care. I didn't do everything right. I made mistakes. I failed. I faltered. I weakened. I tired. I fell short. I was a hypocrite. Sometimes some of the rules that I was imposing were wrong. Like I have a deep, I question, I don't think prohibition works. And I mean that in both the drug and the alcohol sense. I just don't think it worked. I understand.
I think I have to agree with you. Prohibition doesn't work.
Prohibition doesn't work. It doesn't matter what it is. And, we're seeing it being called for in the territory again. And I understand why, because things are just so terrible there. But like, it doesn't work. Like from an enforcement officer's point of view, it doesn't work. In fact, it makes you the bad guys. So you go from keepers of the peace, and that dynamic change is so important. So important. You go from like a keeper of the peace to like, okay, well, I want to kill him and you're getting in my way, but it's nothing personal against you. Like I understand what you're doing. It's just that, man, I got to gripe with him, and it's, I want to take this or I want to do this kind of stuff. As long as you acted, if you upheld your oath, if you acted without fear or favor, without malice or ill will, and that's the hardest bit, like not having hate in your heart, like that. That's easy, but when you get frustrated and you're angry and you're hurt, like not having malice, that's such a big deal.
We're all human. We all react.
I think that's where. Oh no, I don't want to go off on a tangent just yet, but like, I kind of like. I mean, that's I think I was doing the right thing. And I don't, even now going back, and people like, no, people have said this to my face. It's like, you're a bad person. You're upholding a bad system. Like you might have been well-intentioned, but what you did is inherently wrong. And you're kind of like not all that different from the Gestapo or the SS, actually, when push comes to shove. I reject that. I think
you could be very hurt by that, and I think you're justifiably hurt.
Well, I mean, yeah, but that doesn't matter. I don't mind being hurt or challenged. Like, and I both mean in the physical and the mental sense. I actually don't mind, something I've tried really hard to do my competent best with is, when I do something wrong and stupid, and that happens a lot, is to accept correction and to listen. Like, so if someone is telling you these things and like the first time it happens, your blood boils, but the second or third or fourth time it's happened, or I've heard this before, it's kind of like good. It actually gives you the chance to sit down and go, was this true? And I think there's a degree of truth to it, because like what you said before is kind of like true. It's like, yes, people were dispossessed. Yes, dispossession is part of the problem. And yes, the pain of dispossession is held psychically and psychologically. I'm pretty good friends with Ernest Hunter as well, and I'm very familiar with his work, and I know that you're very well acquainted with him as well. And Ernest and I don't agree on everything, but like when you have a man of his of his intellect and his intellect and his study and his experience suggest things, you kind of like you got to say it. I think it's getting me in so much trouble. I think colonization, I didn't do it, but like having been put in that position and as being in a position as to whether continue this forward or to like reverse it and not be part of it. No, I think I did the right thing. And I think the answer, because our system, like going back to the UFO analogy, there are some things that are just better, that deliver better outcomes for human beings. And the metrics I look at is for stuff like that is like, long life, longevity of life and stuff like that. The Western system, for all of its faults, and there are many, and its shortcomings, and its hypocrisies, massive hypocrisies, is the least worst system. And, I think that's how I justify.
I think I guess I go along with a lot of what you're saying, Matt, but what I would like to see how Australia moves on is to acknowledge the original traditional owners of the land.
Yeah.
Don't move back to the Stone Age and the wandering tribes and the Gunyas and the fire sticks, but acknowledge that they have an attachment to their lands and their waters, and encourage them to engage with us, white honky invaders, whatever you want to call us, overbearing magistrates, interfering police constables. Teach us what their culture means. Don't ask us to live their culture, because, as you say, there's no doubt about it that white colonisation of Australia has improved the lot of the ordinary First Nations person. Some wouldn't accept that, but we have First Nation doctors, lawyers, judges, magistrates, police officers. We also have too many First Nation people in custody.
No way, yeah.
And perhaps, and I think, well, that's why the Murri Court was instituted, is to allow the elders, people that have a foot in both worlds, if you like, to help magistrates and police prosecutors and defence lawyers understand what some of the underlying causes of offending and reoffending. It's all right for a white fellow like me to go to Arakoon once a month and impose bloody white black letter law on an Indigenous community who don't know a damn thing about it. You don't know the uptown, downtown situation. A police officer at least lives there, and a competent police officer would get to know his community and know some of the triggering factors, and would try and step in and take away some of the triggers before they were pulled. And that's the beauty of somebody living in the community. It's harsh on the people living there, and I've got the greatest respect for a police officer who goes to Arakoon or any of those Indigenous communities and spends time there, because they're away really from close contact with family, social mores, having a beer after work, those sorts of things. You're living in an enclave. You're surrounded by 1,200, 1,400 people, generally speaking. Not many of them like you. Yeah, I got a lot of respect for the police officer who did that.
I really thank you for that, but I got to jump in. There's only one thing that I would disagree on, and I found wrong, and I think the best way is to just articulate a story. So I'm in Arakoon, and I pinched 4 blokes for, I forgot, it was a brakes or smashed something up, or I don't remember. You know, this is going back 20 years, so I don't remember exactly what the charges was. But after I pinched these blokes, fingerprinting and photographing them, going through all the normal stuff, and we're chatting, you know, as you do. And one of the blokes goes, "Hey Matt, you what are you doing on the weekend?" So actually, I got the weekend off. You want to come home? And I'm like, yeah, okay. So I kind of like went out with the fellas, and mate, it was great. And you know what those communities are like. So, you know, we all piled into this beaten up car with all these camp dogs because they took it was knives and dogs. And like I bought the Glock. Half the reason they wanted me there is just to have a Glock to, like, you know, if something got that was half. Yeah. You know, it's like, oh, he's got. But like we're kind of like, you know, we're out there, and I just kept it in the backpack, just in case, because like we wanted to go knives and dogs. It's the best way, Trev. It's sporting, and it gives the pigs.
I did a couple of times with a copper in, I think it was in Charleville, a bloke by the name of Dale Farm. craziest man I've ever met. Going in with a couple of dogs and a knife. I sit on a tree stump many yards away. There's no way in the world
I
I'd get
loved
involved
it.
in that silly boat.
Oh, I loved it. But mate, we had a pack. We didn't have a couple. Like it was a pack.
Oh yeah, he had about four.
Yeah, mate. Pack of, and they G themselves up and you can feel it. It's really exciting. It's like so primeval. The hairs on your back of your neck. And it's great. We went out there and smacked a few pigs. And after carving these things up, we're butchering them so you can kind of carry them back. And the fellas wanted the meat for the families and stuff like that. And one of the guys goes, "Hey, Matt." I said, "Yeah," I always say his name. I said, "Yeah, all right, eh?" I said, "Oh, yeah, you blokes are too. Thanks for inviting me hunting." He goes, "We're out here in the middle of nowhere. And
you're gone Vicky if they wanted to get nasty. Yeah.
And that's kind of the point he was making. Like he was kind of like he was joking, but it was like, just so you know. But I'm like, and he goes, "How do you feel about that?" I said, "I'm glad I'm here, bro. Thanks for inviting me."
Yeah.
That's all I could say.
Yeah.
And so I went out with those blokes quite a few times, and we went out for sugar bag and stuff like that as well. Like the point being is like, if you're right about the enclave fence thing going on, that's kind of unhealthy. You've got to get out. You've got to actually stay in risk. You've got to you've got to expose yourself. You've got to do that. But you'll be rewarded. And people, they didn't like. I mean, no one likes being pinched, but people kind of got it.
They can
kind of like,
they can respect the pincher. Yeah.
I didn't find that I was hated. That was not my experience. I mean, things may have changed, and it might be very different. Like you get some other coppers who say, "Oh man, it was like Vietnam." Okay, I mean, maybe it's you, but like that just wasn't my experience. I kind of like I found. And don't get me wrong, like it was violent. Like I got more than one smack in the head. I got a lot of stuff thrown at me, but it kind of like. But it wasn't.
Matt, just look at on the screen. You can see you got more than one smack.
Yeah. And if there's any good plastic surgeons listening, and you want to do any free job, have a Captain Cook at this. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah.
I would not have swapped that for quids, and like I didn't.
No, well,
I didn't feel hated. I didn't feel hated.
Do you feel, Matt, now that I don't know how you got there, whether it was a transfer, voluntary, but a lot of young coppers end out first or second year out of academy, and they're shunted straight into a community. And I'm talking not only Arrowtown and places like that, but also Thursday Island. They're taken from a very secure comfort zone to a place where they're the minority, and they retreat into themselves rather than going out and expressing a willingness, as you did. You went out with these boys hunting, going out and expressing willingness to learn culture. Well, I don't know how much culture is chasing pigs with dogs and knives, but I mean, that's probably not traditional. But I mean, this is what these blokes did. That's what they did for entertainment. It's what they did to feed their families. And I guess not putting too much oil on your head and rubbing it in, but I guess they appreciated the fact that you were prepared to do that and learn a little bit about how they went about their lives. And I think that's the way I always felt it. Every community I ever lived in, I played football in. I went to PNC. They didn't see me as a. If I can tell you the story, back in the early days, 1980s or so, in Thursday Island, there was only one restaurant there at the time, but the Federal Hotel had opened up the restaurant. I don't know what they called it, but anyway, so my wife and I and the bloke who was in charge of the PMG, we went down to try at this restaurant first or second night. And I was a smoker in those days. Oh no, it was Bruce was the smoker. My wife and I and his wife went and stood on the corner there. And looking through the window at the Mill Sisters singing. They used to sing there, and I Seaman might have been there at the time. And this fairly intoxicated lady come out and was lambasting me to stand outside making fun of the people inside. I said, no, I'm not making fun. I love the North Sisters. He said, who are you? Who are you? Oh, I'm Trevor Black. Ah, you're the magistrate. I thought you were the one of them Commonwealths. And I mean, my wife was rather taken aback. But I thought that was accepting me into the community, that I'd sort of been accepted. I just wasn't a bloke making fun of the natives, you know, the painted natives putting on a display. I was part of there to be part of the community and the fun.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you the story about how I got to Arakoon then, because, like, you know, I suppose we're in the zone, the back in the day zone. So finished up on, we had a big leave blitz on Thursday. This is when they looked at all the police leave, and there were some guys that just had ridiculous amounts of leave. And it turned out that I had the most amount of leave, both sick and recreational, banked up of anyone in the Far Northern region. And it was something like 5 months, because, like, you know, you just get busy, and, you know, there's more here, whatever it is. And I'd go and you know, and police, I suppose I was a bit of an identity cop back then too. Anyway, so and it was Bob Atkinson, who was the AC here at the time. He personally called me and said, "Oh, Maloney, you've got more leave than anyone else in the Far Northern region." So this is a personal phone call. Mate, I've spoken to your boss. You're allowed to stay on TI, because that was Wayne Nichols. And as you know, Nico's.
Yes, I know, yeah.
Mate, if he picked up the phone and goes, "I want this idiot off the island." And that's what he did. I saw him do that. And there was this cop, like, on the plane, like, with a shocked look on his face, like 12 hours. He's an idiot. I want him off the island. Dunk.
Yeah.
That's how I talk to the bosses. Anyways. So Mr. Atkinson rings me up and goes, "Oh, Maloney, you've got more leave than anyone else in the Far Northern region." He goes, "Incidentally, the Far Northern region has the worst leave problem in all of the state." He goes, "I can't say that you've got the most leave of anyone in the state. I can say that you've got the most leave of anyone in the Northern region, and we've got the worst problems in the state. So I need you to do one of two things. If you want to take a lump of leave, take all your leave as a lump," and it was 5.5 months. I know.
They won't let me stop for smoking, Matt. They have to retrain me.
Sorry, that's good. I'm stealing that. But so it's like, so either that, like, go and take a big lump of leave, but you'll have to leave TI, because we can't have the barracks room held up for that amount of time. Your boss says you can stay. He's actually happy to have you, which was kind of surprising, considering how often him and me used to fight. I'll go off, man. Mate, I'll go off on another quick, and I promise I will come back to this, but it was like a couple of times in there, like I was having an argument, and because he was a tough old cop, like he was a proper tough old cop.
Oh, yeah.
You had to be, like, it wasn't, you know, you didn't call him Wayne, put it that way. It's like you
no.
But he was kind of like, when I first got there, he kind of, well, today they call it bullying. It's like, you know, you're an idiot, Wayne, you sort that out. Like, you know, you're not coming up to the standards. I want this fixed. You annoyed that person, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, "Yeah, senior." But one day, like, he got me in a mood, and I was like, and I blew up. I was like, "Yeah, who the hell do you think you are?" Blah, blah. I stood up to him. He liked it. What he wanted me to do, because the reason he was needling me and bullying me, because he wanted to see what I was made of. And after that, like, we'd have these stand-up blues. He liked it. He threatened to punch me a couple of times. It was like, "My boss, you are way out of line with this." Well, I mean, mate, and he came for me once. But I ran out of Trev, I didn't walk. I ran out of the office once, and he chased me. But the only reason I got away is because I went down you come out the back door of the police station, you go down the breezeway towards the barracks. I got to the door, and he threw a tin, because you know he had that big tin with all the smokes there. Mate, he threw that at me, like, and it was just that angry. I mean, I'm not making this up. I swear to God, ask Jimmy Coates. He was there. So, like, and I'm
who? Ask who?
Sorry?
Ask who?
Oh, Jimmy Coates, James Coates.
Oh yeah,
He was one of the other coppers that was there, and I'm pretty sure Graham Burridge was too. Anyway, but sort of like, you know, sheepish in the next day. It's like, oh, boss, you know, I shouldn't have called you those names, but like, you know, you kind of do.
Mhm.
You know, you're a bit tough on me sometimes, boss. And he's like, the only reason I caught you and ripped your head off Maloney is because your superannuation. My superannuation isn't worth it. He still said to Bob Atkinson, yeah, I'll have him on the island. Like, and he kicked he kicked quite a few cops off. He actually got
I know. Yeah.
Tough man.
I was involved in getting a couple shifted, but one young fellow was raced around the island and his due hotted up car. I threw a wheelie bin out in front of him on Back Beach Road to try and slow him down. I knew who he was, and that was who. That was big. He's finished up in Mariba. Frankie Wagner. I rang Frank up and said, "This boy can't stay on the island." Yeah, so
and gone. Yeah, but so the boss, you know, later to become commissioner, says, you know, okay, so you can do this. So I said, nah, boss, I spoke to, you know, the fiancée, and she goes, no, I want to go do a big holiday, yada yada. So we went and did that. But I'm on the police plane, like flying out. And they said, okay, well, first you got to go to Arakoon. We need someone at Arakoon. So you can go from TI to Arakoon and then Arakoon to Cairns. And I only leave Cairns. Yeah, before you go on this leave. So, I mean, like I was in Arakoon, I ended up there for a few months. And I said, it's only going to be a couple of weeks. And of course, it ended up like being 2 months or whatever, 3 months. And I'm on the plane.
Never volunteered, man.
It's the QPS way. And I'm on the plane with Parcio and Yankee with the guys who are going to jail, like, you know, court plane guys coming out in the bin. And they're used to getting, they know the go, they know it's Cairns coppers that do the escort. And they're like, which way, Matt? What are you doing? Are you going down on holidays? I said, no, but I finished. Done. True. Said, yeah, that's it. 2.5 years, I think. Only 3, whatever it was. So, yeah, mate, I'm done. Undusted, off to you. I go, oh, you should have told us. Where are you going? Cairns? I went, no, actually, I'm going to Arakoon. They dropped me off at Arakoon. And these guys going to jail, Trevor, okay? And this bloke goes, oh, better you than me, Bolla. Oh, I don't want to go.
I'd rather go to jail than down.
He's still go alone, that's right.
Yeah.
And then I got there, but they felt like, again, this, mate, people know each other. So they're on the first few days in Arakoon, and they're like, you know, fresh face, and people coming up there. Who you? Are you from Cairns? I said, no, I'm Matt Maloney. I'm ex-TI Biden, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, okay. And they went away, and obviously there's no mobile phones in these days. People were making phone calls. And people coming up to me, because I went down and played touch footy and stuff like that too, like, you know, like you, I do that. And people coming up to me going, you know, such and such, for, you know, my relative from TI. I said, yeah, I know them. Mate, they called. They'd called, mate, and the network was working. The network was working. There is no underestimating.
Oh, no.
There is no underestimating and people know your reputation. They know your character.
Yeah.
They know presses your buttons, like people know you.
Yeah.
Right? And it's same with
native wireless.
Same with you. But that's what they kind of like, you know, that's what they learned with that. But I think, you know, and I'm sorry because this is actually your interview, but I'm talking way too much, but I'm just enjoying this conversation. But like, yeah, the police aren't doing well because they're forming compounds, and I understand there needs to be security, but a compound is a bad look. And yes, getting people up there who are too junior and they're forcing them to go because no one else wants to go. I get that, but like, you know, I just don't know how to overcome. I mean, with either they kind of said, "Oh, do you want to go?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll go." Like, you know, I don't mind it. And most were volunteers, but I don't know how to overcome that dynamic because it's the Pareto principle. Like the worse a place gets, the more it needs people who are community minded to go in there and sort things out, but less people want to go. It's just like you end up with this negative feedback.
Right. What about getting some First Nations exposure training before they go to these places? I think they probably do.
Yeah, they do. But see, the thing is, and again, I think about this a lot too. And they actually consulted me about this when I was in cross culture. What's culture? Whose culture? Where?
Mm.
See, what the QPS wants to do, and understand, because it's a massive organisation, is, and so people say this, oh, get them some training. They want to send them on one course so they can send them to Binda, Sherberg. It's like, it's not the same.
Yeah.
It's not the same. So
Warrabinda is totally different than Sherberg or Yarrabah or Arakoon. I mean, the cultural difference. There's different. Well, you know, Matt, there's difference between the culture on Murray Island and the culture on York
Absolutely.
Island.
They're different languages.
And it's blindingly obvious once you've been there a few times.
You know, so, I mean, again, there's a question that's a question nested within a question. How do you institutionalize these things and the simple answer is you can't really. You have to experience them, and you got to want to go. So, you know, two things. You got to want to go. I think now, like with this big push for the Queensland Police Service, one of the recruiting things they're doing wrong is they really are, and they're saying they're not. But I can say this now that I'm out of the police. They're saying, oh, no, it's merit-based. It's like, no, there's a lot of quotas going on there. That simply is happening. The standards are dropping. That's true. It's not to take away anything from, you know, newly sworn cops who are, you know, still great, you know, young people. And I was proud to work with all of them. But
they do a bloody hard job.
But so's being a magistrate, mate. And that's one of the reasons why we're having this conversation. And really, you were the person making the decisions in the end. Like, we'd put the coal in the truck, but the coal was going to you. So how did you? I mean, we've just discussed, you know, all the cool parts of it. It's a big thing taking someone's liberty away from them. It's a big thing doing these things, and that's a heavy responsibility that you bore. How did you do it? Like, you know, can you actually tell us what, like, you told us how you kind of like went into it, but like, what was your motivation? Did you kind of think, yeah, I want to be a magistrate, and like why? And then got into it. Tell us about the dissonance between.
No, I guess I fell into it, Matt. Honestly, had no preconceptions. I finished my law, and when I was transferred from Thursday Island to Southport as an acting magistrate, a registrar of the court, I went from 2 staff to 22 staff in the space of a week. But I very rarely sat as worked as a registrar in Southport. I was all immediately yanked up onto the bench in Southport because it was a very busy court, as you understand, and I was qualified, so they threw me up on the bench. I was going to go out into private practice. I was determined that if I couldn't control my life by living where I wanted to live, and I wanted to live in Thursday Island, but I didn't have the necessary support or infrastructure to live there as a non-public servant, I was going to go out in private practice. I was going to join a practice at, I don't know, work with Indigenous people as long as I could get out of Southport or Brisbane. I just didn't. And then I was offered the position as coroner in Brisbane. And actually, I applied for the job of registrar in Darwin, and I got an interview, and very favourable interview. And I asked them then, well, what's the career path from there? Is there a career path from there to the magistracy? And they said, no, it's political appointments. So I said, if I go to Darwin, I don't want to spend the rest of my life in Darwin. I said, with all due regret, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to take that. And then, not out of the blue, because we had a seniority list. You could see yourself moving up the seniority list. And when you got to the top, you knew you were going to be invited to be a magistrate. So I struggled on, and eventually Dean Wells invited me to come up and have an interview with him in Brisbane. He said, I'm considering appointing you as a magistrate. Would you be prepared to accept? I said, don't stand between me and the door, Mr. Attorney. I'll knock you down getting to take it. But clearly, I didn't want to stay in Brisbane. I didn't want to stay in Southport. And Brian Hine, who ended up being the chief magistrate, he was appointed as a magistrate in Cloncurry, knowing that position was going to be subsumed into Cairns. and he didn't want to be in Cairns, he wanted to be in Brisbane. So he and I organised a swap. So I ended up from coroner Brisbane to Division 3 magistrate in Cairns. And that's where that was the start, I guess. That was September 1990.
So tell us about when you.
I'm sorry. You come back to it. You come back to a question. How did I? Yeah. Well, that's how I got there.
Well, what's it like sitting on the bench and having all that responsibility, and like, you know, you're depriving people of their liberty sometimes, or, you know, God, talk us through that. Like, that's a big deal emotionally, and that's a big responsibility.
I guess, you see, I guess I come up. When I was a depositions clerk, I had a lot of good magistrates that I used to take depositions for, and I used to do it in the old typewriter. I don't know if you remember those days.
Yeah,
but
I got one.
I had a lot of good magistrates, and of course they'd come through the system too. They'd been clerk of the courts in country areas, and they had a lot of experience with people, and watching them how they approach people, and some were bad, some were very discourteous to the litigants before them, but most of them were pretty down to earth people. There is a statistic that I read somewhere that 95% of people appear before the magistrates' court. That's their first and only interaction with the judicial system. The ones that come back are the ones that are dissatisfied with the way they were treated by the system. Discourtesy, rudeness, a feeling of injustice, not being listened to. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if a solicitor gets up and says, my client wishes to plead guilty. If the client wants to say something, as long as it's not to his eternal detriment, I think he's got a right to say it. He doesn't have to go through his lawyer. If he wants to say something like, I think the bitch deserved it, well, that's stupid. His solicitor would say, well, don't say that, but he wants to get up and say, look, I'm terribly sorry. I want to apologise to my wife and my children. He should have a right to say that, and not sit down and defend it. I'm not talking to you. You're a disreputable, disgusting piece of human shit. Pack your bags, you're going to the slot. If you treat him as a human being that's made a mistake, I've torn strips off people. I have, because they have just been low, evil. But you have to leave them with that grain of humanity. People can't build themselves up if they've been torn down below their foundations. You've got to have foundations. You have something to build on. And if their foundations in life, in love, in religion, in faith in humanity, faith in the judicial, if that's been all pulled away and wrecked, they're not going to come back. They're going to end up being on the scrap heap of life. They're going to be the long-term inhabitants of Lotus Glen or Palin Creek. But if you give them that grain, that little bit of opportunity to regain their self-respect, I think you can work with most people. That was the concept of the Murri Court, of course, is that they couldn't get in the Murri Court unless they were facing a custodial sentence. To get into the Murri Court, they have to be prepared to take advice from the elders, engage in culturally appropriate diversionary programs, sort themselves out with respect to their accommodation. And at the end of the day, they generally still faced a custodial sentence, but it was a custodial sentence that could have been ameliorated by immediate parole or a probation order or a corrective services, community corrections order. And look, Matt, some of the greatest experience I had in my judicial career was blokes coming back from into the Murri Court, where they've been through this. They'd held their self-respect restored. Their kids were talking to them again. They were in contact with their partners or ex-partners. They stood up in an open court and apologised openly. I had a young girl in absolute tears. Her violent partner, who's mostly triggered by alcohol, stood up and said, "Look, I'm sorry. I really am sorry. I love you, blah, blah, blah." She was in tears. She said this is the first time he's ever apologised for anything in his life. And he's man enough to do it and stand up in open court in front of elders and other offenders. And he was a bloke that I see now and again still out at DFO or out the other one, the Rain Trees. And he often comes up and says hello to me.
Mate, you're a big fan of Murri Court, and actually, I don't mind admitting this. So was I. Can you just explain to the listeners what it meant? The basic. I mean, I suppose you've explained really quickly, but can you just kind of like put it in a nutshell? And can you tell us whether or not it worked, and in the sense of, and what you mean by it worked? So just less offending. Was it like with like?
Yeah, well, there were, I guess, the main criterion they were looking at was recidivism. Whether these blokes were on the merry-go-round of going into court, going to jail, come out of jail, going into court. Someone had to break that cycle. And despite our earlier conversation, an old fat white fellow like me sitting on a bench, giving him a dressing down and sending him to jail was not going to break that circle or that cycle. So the idea behind the Murri Court was, and it was established firstly in Brisbane, and of course they're all urbanised First Nation people, and there was really, and I guess there was that lack of, there was that disconnect between them and their communities anyway. But here in Cairns we had a lot more opportunity. There wasn't that final disconnect between culture and offending. So the principle was that someone had to be facing a custodial sentence. On the normal scale of things, looking at past history, looking at the nature of the offending, these people, men, women, were facing a custodial sentence.
Yeah. And so, then the idea was like, what can we do?
Yeah, what can we do to divert this person from a revolving cycle of incarceration?
And did it work?
Well, I think it did. I think we had a fairly good success rate, and that wasn't my province. That was the province of some very dedicated elders who really,
Uncle Mike.
There was Uncle Joe, Auntie Lillian, lots and lots of really good quality people who were, it's probably harsh to say, that were in that middle ground between totally white people and traditional people. They still had their links to their traditional lands. They could tell you what part of the First Nations community they came from, and they come from various places. Uncle Joe was from down in the Dirranbandy Dandy, we used to call Uncle Joe, and then Auntie Lillian was from the Torres Straits, and there's various others that up around Mossman, Daintree, and we had a range of people. and they were so dedicated and so keen to engage with these people and try and. I was the conduit. I used to say, well, listen, buddy, the old carrot and the stick. You don't, buddy, live up to these people's expectations. I hope next time you come back in here, you got your bag packed, because there's no going home to get it. So I was a good cop, bad cop. I was the bad cop, and and the elders picked up on that, and because I said, you say, oh, Magistrate Black said this, Magistrate Black said that. He means it. He'll bin you. He'll bin you.
Yeah.
And so we had them going down to. Well, there were two different justice groups, Samaru and Gumba Gumba. So I had them going on every week for months. If I would have been a defendant, I would have said, look, go to Buckley. I'm just going to go up to Lotus. It's got to be easier than going. Uncle Joe or Auntie Lillian give me a little tongue lashing every week. And then, of course, then they had to go out to ATODs in various places and get counselling and sometimes they had to go out to Gundarja for rehabilitation. And, they come back, they had an opportunity. They had two things. I think they had a purpose in life. They had to be on the bus on Monday to get down and see the elders. They had to listen to the elders. It wasn't just what they wanted to do. They had an obligation, and I think they felt an obligation to the elders too. And in hindsight, I think they felt an obligation to me too. They didn't want to disappoint me as much as they didn't want to disappoint the elders. So you come back, there might be 3 months between a plea and a sentence. And so they'd come back after 3 months, and you'd see this change and cleaned up. Their skin was better. They didn't have the tremble on their hands.
People looked healthy. You could see
They
it.
looked healthy. Their family used to come in with them, whereas before, if they saw them walking up the road, the family would cross the road. I mean, they had the support. They triggered a support mechanism that probably in Indigenous communities is always there. If you're a First Nations person and you ask for help, you're probably usually going to get it, as long as you're not a full asshole. So these people had invigorated their lives. They're a success story after success story. There's some bloody bad buggers too. I mean, that were just not going to be rehabilitated, or rehabilitated but didn't have the intestinal fortitude to stay on the rails. I mean, they fell off. We generally had a policy that, you get one shot at it. Although we did take a couple back on a couple of occasions because the elders were so keen. They said, well, look, this is just a minor. If they did offend again, Matt, they offended in a much less serious way. So I think Murri Court, in my experience, was a success.
That's I got to say, I liked it, and like remembering I was a cynical cop, I kind of looked at it and went,
you were certainly a cynical cop.
Yeah, and I after a while, because I went there a few times, and this is why I was still operational. And the other thing is, I got to declare an interest here. I got to know Uncle Mike quite well, not as well as I like, but I got to be acquainted with him, and you can just feel it. Yeah. This is going to sound cliche.
Oh, yeah.
You can feel the decency coming out of that man. There's a calm presence around him. He's one of those people. He's got it. He's just got it. Now, this is a question nested in a question, and it's not just specifically about Murri Court. I'm going to expand it, to the judicial system generally. There's an 80% reoffending rate, and that's not you. That's not me. Like, I was part of that system. And there are concerns now about the amount of crime in the community, which in some ways, depending on because I actually know some of the stats, even now still, I'm such a geek, I still read some of this stuff. But did we waste our time? And then I want to talk about, what a justice system could or should look like. Like, I mean, I think it's kind of like okay what we've got, but are we part of an inherently oppressive, bad system that has no meaning or point? Like,
Since I've retired, Matt, I was a member of the Domestic and Family Violence Prevention Council. I was invited to go on that as I was I was still a magistrate. I was a supernumerary. Because of conflict of interest issues, I couldn't go and carry the flag too much, but I was sort of there as an advisor on how magistrates might view certain things like coercive controls and things like that, which is another story. But hang on, I was going somewhere with that. I was, domestic violence was always a thing. I mean, I'm picking one particular type of offending that appalls me as a man, appalls me as a former judicial officer, appalls me as a citizen of our community, that how men, as in a majority, can be so vicious, so cruel, so hurtful to people they purport to love. I mean, I don't know whether it's increased reporting because of there's more exposure of domestic violence. I know there was when I was in the bush, place like Julia Creek and Mitchell, there was domestic violence here. It was sort of police and clerks of courts and medical registrars used to push it under the carpet a bit. I mean, it was and the women themselves didn't want to be known in a small community as a victim. So whether the increase in domestic violence is a result of increased reporting, or whether we've just got desensitized to man the protector, man the companion. Have we gone so far down the ecological path that we reverted back to cavemen dragging women to the cave by their hair after clubbing them? I don't know. It sickens me. It sickens me to my core that some of the things we heard, Hannah and some of the ones just recently, murdered, burnt to death, thrown petrol in a car with kids. I mean, how would you be as a first responder to that, Matt? I mean, yeah, I don't know. I cannot understand. I wouldn't be honest if I didn't say I become frustrated and angry and confused in my own relationships. I've probably said hurtful things. I'm sure I've said hurtful things.
yeah.
But I've never, ever raised my hand to a woman in my life. If I had done that, my father would have, yeah, well, and that used to happen in the communities. You're well aware, if there was a domestic violence incident in the communities, the father-in-law, the brothers would take the young fella down the creek bank and have a talk with him. And my father did that.
They talk, yeah.
My father did that with a couple of his brothers-in-law. He was a family of 6 sisters, and he spoke very seriously to a couple of his brothers-in-law that were, hard drinking Irishmen. But I cannot conceive of a man striking a woman. Although, if I'm allowed to tell a story,
yeah, obviously, as long
you want me to, I got a story.
As long as you don't use names and it's not going to be too identifiable. But yeah, go ahead. Because
no. Well, I've been on Thursday Island about 2 weeks, and the old courthouse in TI up on the hill, down looking over the Bowls Club.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I'm sitting there and I'm seeing an Islander couple walking from the old outpatient back across the front of the Bowls Club, and I was just sitting there, just being amazed how lucky I was to come to such a beautiful part of the world. But bludging, I suppose, I should have been working, but I was watching the view, and this couple walked past, and all of a sudden the man turned the woman and smacked her, dropped as cold as a maggot on the ground. And I had an Islander clerk in the office, Debbie, an Islander clerk in the office. And I said, Deb, ring the police. And she's sitting there watching out the window too. And I said, get the police. She said, wait one. I know this couple, wait one. So the woman got up and dusted herself down, turned in front of the bloke and smacked him, dropped him as cold as a maggot on the footpath. He got up and dusted himself off, and they joined hands and walked back down towards the federal. I mean, so that was a question of equality. I mean,
equal opportunity offending, isn't that just that one?
Yeah.
No, I mean that's it. It's so complicated. But I read a paper just recently by a fellow. He's probably going to chat to me actually, Professor Murri. I can't pronounce his surname. But he's written all these papers, and he's fundamentally suggesting that, you know, we've got sentencing policy all wrong, and there's a disconnect between sentencing policy and outcomes. And he goes, you know, people still aren't looking at evidence. It's driven by sentencing. It's driven by communal political concerns, and that's impacting the incarceration rate, which is for Indigenous people, but the incarceration rate in Australia generally is rising. And he's
since deaths in custody inquiry, the rate of Indigenous incarceration is grown exponentially. That's right.
But it's like, again, so, you know, there are these constant cries that is itself prima facie evidence that there's something broken and something inherently oppressive of the system.
One of the key things about sentencing is supposed to be to deter the offender and like-minded individuals from reoffending. Well, that's not working. People are going into jail and coming out of jail, not deterred, punished perhaps, but certainly not deterred. And the fact that them going to jail doesn't deter their cousin brothers.
And there's literature on that too. It's about being caught.
Right. People aren't frightened to go into jail; they're frightened of getting caught.
Getting caught, and that's a very important distinction. You've nailed it. That simply. And people think, well, that's one and the same. It's like, well, no. If there's not a good chance that you're going to be caught, well, you're not really considering the outcome. And the evidence, the way I understand the evidence, and you know, I haven't read all of the literature because there's a lot out there. But if you get caught quickly, even if the fine or whatever the punishment is small, but if you get caught quickly and dealt with quickly, it's a lot more of a deterrent in that sense.
It's a better deterrent than
But one of the other things, sorry.
You go, Matt. Sorry.
One of the other things the professor said was, he goes, look, we're too soft, and this is an oversimplification, but I'm quite sure that I've got this correct. He said, we're too soft on violent offenders, and we're too hard on offenders who don't provide real risk to the community. I have an issue, and I'm really, like I said, it's really exciting, actually. He's indicated he's probably going to come on. It's just a case of getting him, of getting him free. But I'd like your take on this, because he puts the idea of property offenders, like this is a categorical issue. He says, look, you know, they're not really a big risk to society. Someone who's stealing cars or breaking into houses and stuff like that, property offenders, basically. That's not a risk to society. I disagree completely. The reason being is not so much, and it's because I've dealt with disproportionately in Indigenous communities. If you are on the bottom rung of society, and I think you'll get this, your fingers are holding on, like something like a car is a big deal to you. So, example that I know of, there was a beautiful Torres Strait Island girl who had her car stolen. She calls me up and goes, Matt, you know, my car stolen. She reported it through the other thing, but then she rang me at Cairns Station. And I owed her a lot of favours. She helped me clear up so much crime in the streets. It just wasn't funny. She goes, mate, I want you to go, like, sort this out, okay? I want someone, you owe me favours. You said you owe me favors. Get on it. And I'm like, okay. Long story short, I went out and did a lot of free overtime, ran a lot of cages, and did what I thought was some pretty good police work. And got all these guys, and they were just like, they all had to be community conference. And that's not a bad thing. Like, I'm not knocking community conferencing. I think there is, I think restorative justice in the right time and the right circumstances is a really, really fantastic.
But it's got to be early, Matt. It's got to be early. It can't be the 15th or 20th offence.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's time. Look, I'm not anti this thing. But I said, we're going to have to, and like I'm on the phone, like doing the, here's your knight in shining armor here, mate. Like, I've just gone and I wrapped it up in like within about 24, 48 hours and did a lot of free overtime. It's like when I got two of these guys in a community conferencing, she just gave me an earful. It's like, you're not getting it, you idiot. Like, that car is what I need. Like, it kind of like, and I'm paraphrasing what she said here, because that was what's keeping me. These aren't the exact words she used, but this is what she said. She goes, that thing was keeping me on the bottom rung of society. I'm using that beaten up old car that was worth much less than a solicitor's weekly wage, or a cop's weekly wage for that matter. To get the kids to school. She used to do a little bit of like, she was on Social Security, but she used to do a little bit of cash in hand work as a waitress. And used to do a little bit part.
It's her job.
And used to volunteer at the tuck shop and stuff like that. So that was, that beaten up car was nothing to people like, you and me, and nothing to the solicitors, and no disrespect to, because we're all part of the same justice administration system. This is not nothing to the courts, but they're kind of like, not that much of a big deal. Mate, it changed her life for the worse, and probably for some of her kids, because they weren't getting to school. Like, they end up missing school because you couldn't get there. The buses and all that.
Yep.
So the professor is kind of saying, hey, this isn't so much of a risk, and these people aren't destroying society all that much, and we can easily identify. So you go to a violent crime, like those terrible DVs that you went to, and like I went to 3 murders in 3 weeks in Arakoon. Talking to one of the teachers who was there at the time, who was actually, he goes, oh, Matt, I did statistics at university, and for this month, he goes, I'm just going on newspaper articles, but that was at, so this is in the early 2000s, late 90s. Early 2000s. He goes, looking at the murder rates reported in the newspapers for Johannesburg, he goes, Arakoon is worse than Joburg.
Yeah, most violent place on earth.
Per head of population, like it was out of control for that time. When I was there. Now, as bad as that is, and don't get me wrong, so I don't want to talk about some of those murders. Though, just that one of them was just so good. But that's worse. Of course, taking someone's life is worse than taking a car. But this idea that that's not harmful and that's not a risk to society and doesn't impact on the individual and communally. I kind of disagree with the professor.
Yeah, I think you've typed me. I think the only good reason to incarcerate anybody is if they are a risk to society. But where do you draw the line of what is a risk? Do you draw the line when a young tradie who just got his first apprenticeship, he's got his car outside and his tools and all that on board, and his car gets stolen and burnt and destroyed, he's lost his opportunity. What happens? Does he then drop his bundle and get on the grog and then come home and beat his missus? I mean, where do you draw the line of what is and what is not a risk to the community?
It's a categorical issue.
Jaywalking or shoplifting or petty crime or public nuisance, unless it's violent public nuisance, I don't think they justify incarceration. But I do think, and perhaps I need to be a bit careful here too, I do think that people who have a total and utter disrespect for other people's property, not just one-off opportunism, walking past and find a car with the keys in and think I'll take this for a run, but break into a house and rustle through a house to find keys, take keys from bedside tables besides sleeping people. They are a risk to society. I know that if I woke up and there was someone standing beside the bed, rustling through I would react very badly, probably very inappropriately, probably much to my detriment because he's probably bigger and stronger than what I am. But I mean, while he was having a feed, I'd be having a nibble, Matt. I mean, and therefore my life's at risk. His life's at risk. He does a run in the car. He's speeding away from the scene. I know police don't chase these days, allegedly, but he's racing away from the scene. They're dropping donuts and so forth. There's little kids, there's animals, there's old people going for walks early in the morning or late at night. Their lives at risk. It's not just the fact that they've stolen a car. The risk to the society is, I guess, you can take an overarching view of that. It's just a demoralisation of society. Oh, everybody goes, oh, this bloody world is terrible. We can't leave our doors unlocked. We can't do this. The mood of the community is suppressed. We don't trust each other anymore. One of the best parts about living in small towns, not like places like Garrick and that, but Mitchell and Julia Creek and Charleville and is that you really felt part of a community. You thought that, okay, oh God, I left the keys to the car. I won't worry about it. No one's going to pitch my car, although they did. But they were the real rubs. You knew that, they weren't just some kids busting into your house and they might come into your house and go into your back door and steal a couple of stubbies or something like that. But that's not death.
That's not a big deal. It kind of is because, like, I mean, for toughs like that, we're in total agreement. But see, the issue is that there's a value judgment behind all of that, and find myself, and you may find this ironic and amusing, considering how stupid I've been in the past. But I find myself defending the courts a lot now, and defending magistrates, like online and stuff like that. Because there's all this vitriol going around. And Trevor, I don't think, mate, it's not healthy. It's not healthy.
It's not healthy. It's not healthy. But sometimes, see, if magistrates were able to explain them, and magistrates should. A magistrate should, if he's giving a controversial decision, say, look, I'm doing this and I'm doing it for these reasons. Unfortunately, our journalistic colleagues don't always report it accurately. We've got a magistrate in Townsville that's under severe attack at the present time. And I don't know enough about it. But there is a principle of justice that, fresh justice is good justice. We've got these kids sitting in watch house and I suspect, I haven't spent much time in a watch house myself, but there would be not great conditions. I don't know. The copper say she cracked the shits.
But it was the local MP. One of the local MPs started talking about it too. Like,
well, that's right.
You can't go knocking those institutions, Trevor. You can't do that.
No. Well, it devalues the authority of the courts. As
I well know, as you know that I know.
But I mean, I found a bloke guilty when I was sitting on the bench in Southport. A high profile. I can't remember much about it. Pretty high profile, but he and his solicitor walked out of the court, and somebody asked him, what do you think about that decision? And he said, "Oh, that's only his first round." He said, "Well, this bloke's only the preliminaries. We're going to take it further." But devalued the magistrate's decision entirely. And to his credit, the then chief magistrate come out and tore, and as did the Law Society, tore strips off him. The magistrate might have been wrong. No, me probably was. But I mean, you have to say, well, the matter is going to be subject to an appeal. The magistrate's decision will be reviewed by another court. We abide the decision of the court.
See, I kind of like, and I know this is a weird thing to say, everyone blames COVID for everything, but this COVID, like the rule of law, the police and the courts, we both trade on the same thing. And really, magistrates used to be called police magistrates. And like it's important.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then we went to superior magistrates.
Yeah. And it's important because, and basically, as you know, it started off in colonial times. The magistrate was fundamentally the officer in charge of police, was what the boss of the cops.
Yeah, but that's right.
You know?
Yeah, that's right.
And you needed that split. Don't get me don't.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but like
yeah.
this idea that fundamentally the police actually answer to magistrates, it took me years to understand that. And it was only when the historical context had someone, had a cop sit down and explain to me, I know in certain terms, it's like, explain the history to me. It's like the blah, 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 blah. Your actual, practically speaking, like, yes, the commissioner is the boss of the police, but you've got to understand locally, the person you actually answer to is the magistrate. And I know that sounds counterinstinctual, but it's true. It's actually true. The person who is really going to influence the way you do business, even as just a street constable,
I'd have some concerns about accepting that principle. I think there is tactics at play everywhere. Police prosecutors say you have to know your magistrate. Solicitor says you have to know your magistrate. They know that Trevor Black supports the Dragons. They'll drag some story about St George into their bloody cross-examination. Police prosecutor will know that I'm particularly anti-domestic violence or particularly anti-this or anti-that. You play your fish. And I think that's one of the reasons the magistrate has to be so, what's the word I'm looking for? So clear, so, the word, man, I can't think of it.
Yeah. I think I know.
Alzheimer's is kicking in, but I mean, it's got to be obvious. You can't hold back and make decisions. You were talking about magistrates in the past being seen to be pro-police. I think a magistrate, if he's got a view, as long as it's a legal view, I think it should be obvious to the community. It should be obvious to the police. I've said when I went for drink driving myself, Cairns Post brought it up that I had been very scathing of drink drivers, and I was a hypocrite. But those drink drivers were 0.17s and I was a 0.056. I mean,
that was everybody knows. I
lost respect for the Cairns Post in those days. I mean, I was wrong. I was very wrong. But
the funny thing was, and I can talk about this now, because I know the coppers that were involved in that, and mate, they were poor they actually felt bad. They actually
I know. And
they really felt bad. They genuinely did, and they knew. No one who knows you, Trevor, that was just an honest and reasonable mistake. I shouldn't really use that word because it's kind of got all legal connotations. But
honest and reasonable. But I mean, that's not a defence for drink driving.
No,
it's
mate. The level is the level. That is it. The end. Fair.
That's right.
And you've got to have one somewhere. But like it, I mean, to guys like us, it didn't matter. It just seriously that was nothing. But like to go back to the COVID thing, I'm really concerned about an undermining of our institutions, and it's come through COVID because I have to choose my words here carefully. The rule of law works on the idea that laws are simple, few, easily understood, and basically upheld and agreed upon by everyone. So if you have massive amounts of civil disobedience, you have to start to question the validity of the law. And like I'm not making, I'm just observing. observing a dynamic. I'm not making a value judgment about the rightness or wrongness or any one thing. I'm observing a dynamic that I know, and I'll stand by that comment. It's true. I think a lot of the reason you get a lot of the sovereign citizen movements that are becoming really big now, and that were becoming like really big when I was leaving the police. And ironically, but they're kind of like this flip side is like, because they call themselves the common law, like one of the groups now, they're common law experts, or the common law society, and they're always flying the merchant marine flag. I was talking to one of them one day at one of the rallies and said, "Why are you flying the merchant marine flag? That's the red flag." You know what I mean? Said, "Oh, the only law that we recognise is the international merchant marine laws." What does that even mean? Like, how can you even engage in a conversation? But I understand how I understand how people get that, because our system, it really is, like I said, this is why I defend it. For all of its faults, and hypocrisies, it really got the right balance, I think, the least worst balance between individual rights, because we are, as a culture, individual freedom matters. We see things through the lens of the individual and how that individual interacts with the collective. So it's not like the collective is most important and the individual answers the collective. It's actually the other way around, which is kind of like, it's not that there's not a relationship, but we got that balance between the relationship through due process pretty much right. And because we had the right amount of laws, like small amounts of laws, and although that's changed so much, like, too many laws, it's just ridiculous now. But I understand why people get frustrated with our institutions, even if I don't agree with the way they go about it. And I'm debating them. I don't waste too much time online anymore, and I actually went to one of these rallies once and stood up and kind of said, what you're saying is wrong. And I said, I've actually been, in trouble for saying stupid things in the past myself. So I'm in a position to say, but you want to be really, really careful about undermining institutions that have worked so well for so long. Because you just
agree with you that things. In general, our society works well. We, in our sphere, if you offend, you've got the resources there to investigate properly, apprehend offenders who have an opportunity to put their case before a independent judicial officer. And if you don't like the decision, both sides, you've got the opportunity to have that reviewed by a superior court. And you can't tell me that mistakes are still not made. There are probably people in jail for life for murders that they never committed. I don't know. That might be a very broad-ranging statement. But how many men or how many people in America have been executed that 20 years later they find exonerating evidence? I mean, that's why I'm against the death sentence. I know I've made mistakes at law, mistaken assessment of evidence, and I can say, "Oops, I made a mistake." But when these blokes go on through electric shear or a lethal injection, not much point saying, "Oops."
Yeah, I mean, look,
and mud sticks. Their family is.
Sorry about that, Chief.
Demonized.
No, that's right. Like, I know I've never really been pro, even when I was a, really
redneck
young constable in my first 2 or 3 years. Like I was never for it, but that's because I'm a Catholic. So
I think it's fair to say that when you're reading something in the cold, hard light of day and you see the evilness of what somebody's done, we watched a movie last night that was loosely based on Charles Manson, who murdered Sharon Tate in Hollywood. And the gut feeling was, this bloke really has no right to remain in human society. And of course, people say, well, he's going to spend the rest of his life in an air-conditioned cell, 3 meals a day, clean beds, colour TV. But do we make ourselves legalised murderers? I mean, are you going to be the one that's pushed the hypodermic syringe in somebody's arm? I know I couldn't do it.
No.
That movie, The Green Mile.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And again, look, I know these are fictional accounts, but the reason they resonate with us is because they're talking about archetypal situations that we actually know. Like there's a degree of truth. Like it may not be factual, but what they're saying is true. There's a degree of truth to that. Like one of the other things that I think is one of both our greatest strength and our greatest weakness is the fundamental idea at the basis of our system. And I only started to understand this, God forgive me, after about 15 years. Because I'm not a quick learner. That it's a recognition of the humanity and the value of the humanity of a person. And that's a value judgment, okay? Like it's actually an article of faith, really, that someone who has been accused of pedophilia or murder or being a murder, list all of the crimes here. Well, that person is going to get due process. They're going to get the right to silence. They're going to be treated like a human being, even though they have acted in what we call an inhuman way. And that's another argument in and of itself, because like there's this magnificent psychologist that I love. He goes, how can anything be called outside of human behavior when a human does it? Like we just tell ourselves it's like, oh, that's not human. It's like if a human being does it, by definition, that's human.
By definition, is human.
Yeah,
I was speaking to a barrister last Thursday afternoon. I was having a beer with a couple of old colleagues.
That's unlike
he
Trevor.
Just red wine usually.
Twisted arm.
But he just successfully defended the murder trial. The defendant had pleaded guilty to manslaughter, but denied intent.
Yeah.
And we having sort of this similar discussion we're having now, and I said, how do you go about deciding whether to put your client in the witness box if you know in your own heart, or you suspect in your own heart, that he's guilty? How can, well, of course, by law, by ethics, they're not allowed to put something before the court that's intrinsically untruthful. But if they just, and they're as good a judge as character you and I are, Matt, probably sometimes better. Yeah. And he said, I rarely believe my clients are innocent. He said, but they are entitled to a hearing, to an assessment of the evidence at law by an independent panel, either the magistrate or a panel of his peers. He said, if I get them off, I can pat myself in the back, but say, well, I've got some distaste for that, but that's my job, and that's what defendants are entitled to.
It's a strength
to be found.
Look, when I talk to people about this, including especially, your more senior cops get it, okay? But like, when you're junior and you're young and you want to save the world, and you've polished your armor and you're all that, you're on your white Charger and you're out there to save the world.
Yeah.
And God bless them, that was me. I can't mock that.
Well, I can remember a very young Matt Maloney coming in the prosecutor's cause. Do you remember that? And
yeah,
you were opposing.
I'm a mixed race, very Irish, Catholic, Mongolian. I got a temper, sir. What do you want from me?
Do you remember the story?
Yeah,
do you remember the story?
I know the case you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I said to your supervising officer, if that young fellow does that again, he'll be going out through the watch house door,
and I
not
deserved
through the
it.
Front door.
And I deserved it.
No, you didn't. You were passionate. And I mean,
no, but again, here's
but that was
saying no.
Lack of training, Matt. I mean, then you should have been. You should have been
okay. Like it was a lack
counsel that you're not going to win every case.
it's not as if I didn't know. I just lost my I just lost my temper. Like it's so. I mean, you know, can we blame the system? Can we blame everything else? And you know, was I coming from the right place? Yeah, probably. But no, I was wrong. I was wrong, and I deserved that chastisement. And
well, your behaviour was wrong.
well, I mean, you know, the threat of jail tends to do that for a chap. But no, but like again, you've got to. It's okay to be passionate and motivated. In fact, that's a strength. But you know, to this idea that you think that your moral antennae vibrate at some higher level, like you know that. And fundamentally, that's because it's arrogance.
That's right.
I spoke to a oh man, I got in so much trouble over that. And it's like the person that chastised me most, actually, because we can talk about that and well, another issue that I don't discuss too much. My mum and my dad, like, called me in after another, and I know you know what we're talking about. I'm sorry, listeners, I don't want to articulate. I'm too ashamed.
No.
But my mum and my dad. Oh my God, strips they tore off me. Like I know how, because like, you know, we're pretty thick, the Maloney's. And like my dad was just like, you said what? You did what? Oh my God, like shame job. And like, you know, my mum was just like tore strips from me, and but see, you got to do that, and you got to accept the correction, and you got to, again, it's okay to be passionate. You know, and it's okay to be
in your own mind as well. Yeah.
So, you know, but you can't. But see, you need humility, because fundamentally at the heart of that is pride, because you think that you know better. You think that you know better than, like, you know, the collective thought of, you know, the legal system since the time of, you know, King John, when the Magna Carta was signed. You think you know better? Like, who do these people kind of like think they are? Like, you know, I kind of like, you know, and like I'm, you know, mea culpa. I'm one of those people. And it was kind of like, yeah.
I was never concerned about being corrected on appeal. And I looked at,
it didn't happen to you all that much. I think you were one of the least appealed against magistrates.
I didn't get many appeals, but when I was appealed and they successfully appealed, and I used to think to myself, well, he's only another judicial officer. He's got a different view of the evidence than I had. He might be more learned at law than I am, but I applied the law as I saw it to be. And if he says, well, magistrate made an error of fact or an error of law, well, thank you, Judge. I'll take that on board when I get a similar case in the future. And that's it. The hierarchy of the courts.
Yeah, and that's why I like, because like we're self-correcting. Our courts have got high amounts of accountability and a self-correcting, and that's our greatest strength. And that's what what people don't get. Like you know, and to go back to the other thing we were talking about too. One of the, you know, these things that people think are our greatest weaknesses are in fact our greatest strengths. Because I was discussing with an atheist too, because I get on these atheist forums, and because I want to learn a certain.
A name like Maloney, you'd be playing with fire.
No, yeah, I know, but like I actually, I mean, for a while I didn't believe, because like, you know, you see a lot of human suffering, and you go, where is this?
Exactly right.
Yeah, of course, and but then once you start to understand, you know, how things work without going into, you know, the theology of that, it's like, no, it's in fact there's actually yeah. Anyway. But so this, and I'll read what this atheist guy said. He goes, look, so because we're talking about, I said, I made the statement. I said, you know, all human beings are of equal spiritual value. And he goes, you know, so the nastiest, most evil, monstrous, violent, even child rapist is of equal value to the sweetest, most loving, kind hearted human, someone like Mother Teresa. Wow. And I answered, yes. Like, that's not to say that those people's lives were equally lived. I'm not saying they had equal outcomes, but are their lives of equal spiritual value, of equal value?
If you believe in an almighty, well, what's the Bible verse? Though he be but a sparrow in the field. You know, he has as much weight
of
with
value
God as a pharaoh.
and see, that's it. I mean, that value is at the heart of our legal system.
Mm.
It's at the heart of our legal system, you know, and it's
No, it should be at any event.
yeah, and people are trying to remove it. Fundamentally, there's a lot of you know, there's a big push. There's a big push behind this. Mate, one of the other questions I have, and like it's gonna, and I wouldn't mind you to like thinking of this. So you know, tune in for the listeners. This will be the next following conversation is, and it's related to the conversation we were just having now. Now we're all pro human rights, but there's this weird push, like especially with the writing of the Human Rights Act, and I always thought that was a bit odd. I was like, well, really, all these human rights are part of the very fabric of the way we do business, like you know, the right to silence, the you know, the right to a trial, all of these basic things. It's like, oh,
treated as equals. Yeah.
Sorry,
to be treated as equals. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's like, oh, what, you know, we didn't know this until the 1960s, till there was a declaration. It's like what a load of codswallop. These things are woven into, especially the Anglosphere thing. I see now, and this is a controversial statement, but I actually think it's true. A lot of, because the Human Rights Act and all these things are vague principles that are written out that are really open to open slather interpretation and like, you know, the interpretive framework you come through. So if you come from, say, a critical race theory interpretation, which sees things purely as struggles, you know, power struggles between groups and individuals, as, you know, again, that's a very different interpretive framework than the traditional Judeo-Christian one. I see a lot of these human rights things as a way of attacking and undermining a lot of the common law precedents that we've had. And a lot of
the my mind to that.
Yeah. Can you think about that? and that'll be our. But the other thing is, and you know, I said this before, and I'm happy to edit this out. I look forward to your book. Just saying.
Oh yeah, you could be waiting for a while, young Matthew, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if people will be interested. But anyway,
2 hours a day, 2 hours. That's all you need. Like if you wrote 2 hours a day, even giving yourself a Sabbath off, you'd have 10,000 words before you knew what. Before you knew it. I'm just.
But what would people be interested in? I mean,
are you kidding me?
God.
Well, exactly what we've discussed. Like, so what people are going to really want to know is like, what's it like? So you're sitting there on the bench. It's like, okay, you're going to deprive this guy of his liberty. What's it like? Or you're going to find him not guilty, and you suspect that he might be guilty, and you know that's going to, you know, the victims and the police and everything aren't going to like it. You know, you're going to tell an angry, untrained prosecutor something that he doesn't really want to hear. Like, what's it like? What's it like doing that? And again, because most people live, well, everyone lives one.
I think they might be asking me to go into my inner soul.
Yes,
I don't know. It's
exactly. That's where you should walk, and that's what people are gonna want to know. And the other thing is, what has it taught you? Because vicariously, you've lived thousands of lives, and I'm not making this up. And I know this sounds weird, and you know me well enough to, I mean, okay, I'm a bit eccentric, but like vicariously, you've understood the perception of thousands, if not tens of thousands of victims, thousands, if not tens of thousands of offenders, thousands, if not tens of thousands of witnesses, thousands of, you know, of the police perspective, of the defense solicitor's perspective, of all these things. You have this unique, transcendent perspective, and people are going to want to know about that. I'm telling you, it's really interesting. People, what are most movies and TV series is made of? They're made about the cops, and that's just like, that's not even all that interesting, really. Like, you think of the perspective from above. I'm telling you, that's sorry, I don't mean to tell you. It's not for me to tell you anything, but like, if I can vehemently suggest that would be of great interest.
I'll think about it. I think about it at times, but I come to the point of view sometimes. I think, well, you know, who am I? I mean, I'm pretty simple old country boy.
And when I was talking to Joe Butland the day before yesterday, she goes, "Who am I? I'm a girl from Mossman. Why do you want to talk to me?" Maybe because you were like an international. You played sport, and she goes, "Matt, you know, I'm not that." You know, she she's sort of like, you know, I don't have all that interesting thing to say, you know. I'm of average intelligence. I'm of average, like, you know, I'm not that smart. I'm not that articulate. It's like, it's not the point. I'm missing the point entirely here. It's because you're one of us that you've achieved this amazing thing. It's because you are a simple country boy from Toowoomba that loved living in the Torres Straits and saw and heard these things. It's not despite those things, it's because of those things.